we were doing.
This is an interview with Geneva Wiskemann for the Voices of Lansing project by Joyce Moffatt. It's being conducted at Lansing Civic Players Firehouse on March the 6th, 1990 at 11:30 in the morning. Geneva is a close personal friend, but I knew of her reputation long before I ever came to Lansing. Many people called her the First Lady of the Capitol because after the fire at the library, they moved the state library over to the Capitol, and Geneva was there providing information for people who came to the Capitol for 2 years after the fire. Geneva, those days must have been very exciting with the legislature and the governor and everything that was happening around the Capitol. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, right after the fire, the only place we had to serve the people of Michigan was a former tourist bureau information center. We're going to have to keep banging this to make it run.
Even for a demonstration tape?
Even for a demonstration tape. But, in fact, if you walk in there now, Joyce, you can see the stain on the floor from the walnut that was in the wood that formed the counter where we served the... Now let's continue for a second. Now,
this is take two, is what we'll call it. Take two on an interview tape with Geneva Wiskemann for the Voices of Lansing project by Joyce Moffatt. It's being conducted at the Lansing Civic Players Firehouse, and this is March the 6th, 1990 it's now about 12:10 in the morning. Geneva, let's go on. We had started to talk about you as the First Lady of the Capitol, that you, after the fire, provided 2 years of information there at the Capitol to anybody who came in and needed information. It must have been an exciting place there at the Capitol with the governor and the legislature.
it was a great laboratory for learning for me because we served the public. It was the only place we could contact the public at first after the fire. It was where people returned books and picked up books. And we also served state agencies and all the personnel of state government. It was, I was not the only person that worked there. There were other employees, but I think I worked there the longest. At first we were open full-time there. We had a teletype there that was connected to other teletype systems across the United States, and we were able to get books on interlibrary loan. That was the only way we had before we had OCLC and the modern technology that we have now. And we opened that teletype service up to state agencies too. We moved prisoners by it. We communicated with all the DNR, what was then the Department of Conservation offices, and served all of state government through that teletype service. It was very unique and novel at that time. It was one of Mrs. Fyen's ideas of how to continue to give service to the people of Michigan, even though we were in a state of disaster after the fire.
What year would that have been?
1951, 52. The fire was February 8th, 1951.
I love your stories of the fire, how you told how you had to move entire shelves of books that were soggy from the water from the hoses.
Yeah. The water, it was such a cold day that the water literally froze in the air before it hit the building. And the building was covered with ice. It was when the fire hoses actually went away. And George and I were up there quite illegally about 5 days after the fire was out taking photographs. I loaned those photographs to the state library and they have disappeared, which is a disappointment because they were wonderful 35 millimeters photographs of the actual destruction that showed the one mezzanine floor fallen through into the other with file cabinets in a pit and all, and pillars burned off because it was so hot that even the cement burned. It was a tragic thing. The Historical Commission records were, of course, the archives was there on steel shelving, And I remember it was the materials that were there at that time were still wet. It was all ashes, gray ash, but it was like they were sculpted out of ash. There were piles of books, books on shelves, piles of manuscripts, sculpture, all kinds of things. But they were just perfect in ash.
Oh my.
And as our bodies walked by them, the currents of air from our bodies would make the ashes fall down.
And be destroyed forever.
And it was gone forever. Even the 3x5 cards that told what archives were there were completely charred, like totally charred pieces of toast within the metal file cabinet, so we had no way of knowing what truly burned. But everything that was on that mezzanine floor was destroyed.
I saw just one picture, and I know what you're talking about. It seemed...
It was a traumatic experience. Then when I went back to work, I wore a steel helmet and boots. Like we had squads. Each staff person had their assignment. We were still a Red Cross emergency at that time. And I got a crew of 5 or 6 men from Manpower, and they were unusual men. You know, they drank hair tonic on the job and pinched your behind. And they were the men that helped me, and my job was to examine books for wetness and move them off of shelves into boxes, and they had steel conveyor units set up so we could move the books out of the building. And after we got the wet stuff out, then we, of course, as the building began to dry and they turned on the heat, then everything molded. Nothing dirtier than books, so whole handprints would show up in yellow and red and green on the covers, and the books swelled. Sometimes you could have to use a crowbar to get them out of the shelving because the paper expanded. There was a situation in the basement where we had unique sets of federal documents where the books expanded so much that the wood shelving that they were in was actually splintered. It pushed the wood right out of its fastenings. It was a tragic area.
You were with the state library for over 10 years, so you saw the change then from what it had been through what happened in the fire and then on to its new home.
Eventually, I've lived long enough to see the new building built. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to live long enough to see that. They were in temporary housing in the 300 block of Shiawassee Street, where the Lansing Community Arts and Science Building is now. It was a very old building. I remember at one time I would work part-time there and part-time in the Capitol and carry books back and forth, in addition to having deliveries in the morning and the afternoon, so that we served people on telephone demand. And that building was interesting. I remember it had a curly maple floor on the second floor, but it was so old that if they moved a file cabinet on the second floor, the people on the first floor got up and moved away from the area.
They weren't that confident that it was going to...
No, it was not built for its use. And of course they were there for a long time before they moved out to East Michigan Avenue. And from East Michigan they were able to move to the new building. Whole new world of library science and service now. But certainly years of struggle.
You've always played a key role in the community, there with the library system, preserving history, but your roots are very deep in the community. There's streets named after your ancestors. You've been here that long.
Oh, my mother was a Howe, and in Clinton County we have Howe Road, which was named for William R., her grandfather.
And then your Kebler roots were the German.
Yes, they came, I'm sure, much later, 1854, but they moved from a farm in Ingham County, out here on Harrison Road, down to Clinton County in Eagle Township and established a farm home there.
And you still remain in Clinton County with your farm, which is how
Yeah.
old?
Well, we still own a small section of the original farm, but I live in Watertown now, which was a home where my husband had his residence when we married. So I still end up in Clinton County. But it's nice living in the capital region because county lines disappear. I'm pleased about that because that means you can work anywhere. You don't have to say you're from a particular county. You're from the capital region. I think that's much more important. I'm so delighted that in the mayor's State of the City address this year, he talked about a regional chamber council for the city, which means they would have representation from Bath, DeWitt, Eagle, and Watertown, and all the townships of Clinton County, which are so affected by what the mayor and city council in Lansing does. And that's the way the money comes down. It comes down regionally. I think that's a step in the right direction.
I think it is too, because we need representation. We all feel the outcome of what happens in Lansing. So we should be represented in that outcome. You were president of the Historical Society of Lansing, but again, this wasn't just Lansing. It was the Greater Capital Area Historical Society.
Right. That society has used the boundaries of the Lansing Community College School District for their boundaries, if they had any. They never really had any boundaries, but we had representation from Ionia, Shiawassee, Clinton, Ingham, and Eaton. And it was Greater Lansing, and it was the parent of many small historical societies. Eaton counties, Clinton counties, Grand Ledge, Eaton Rapids, Mason. We were also the parent of the Michigan Genealogical Council, because that started as just an interest group, like a subcommittee in the Historical Society. But genealogists are more inner-directed than historical people. Historical people, are born with their arms wide open, and because they grew with their own special interest, then they went off like the good child they were and became independent and followed their own challenges.
What were the goals of the Historical Society here in Lansing?
To preserve the history of Lansing and serve as an educator, I believe, and make it fun for people. We never intended to accumulate materials because we had the state located here, the State Museum, as poor as it was at that time, and the university, Michigan State University's museum. There have been several others that flowered during the bicentennial era, and we have even more now than when the society was formed. And we had the public library, that was accumulating books. We in no way wanted to be competitive. We wanted to send it to established collateral collections. And I still believe in that.
You managed to save the records of another organization, the Chamber of Commerce. And I've heard you talk about seeing the building being bulldozed, and you take over from there.
Well, the Chamber of Commerce had a red brick building. It was a classic piece of Lansing architecture, which was bulldozed to make it was right next to the old Pruden Auditorium. And when they took down the Pruden, they soon took down the Chamber of Commerce building, and many of the records were still in the building, and they sold off the woodwork. The woodwork in each room was different. There was a curly maple room, a cherry room, and so forth. And I know that Rollins Devens was able to acquire the bound volumes of the State Republican and some of the State Journal that were in there. And later, many years later, we were able to use that collection to fill in a gap in the microfilm file that's at the State Library, because we found it there in Rollins' basement. and the records were actually bulldozed under with the house. And one day a man who worked for the highway department called me up and offered to sell some materials, and he said, I asked him where he got them, and he said, well, I'm just picking them up from the new soil where they're putting in this new state building, which would be the Mason building. And sure enough, when you walked over there, you could see papers still sticking up from the surface, blowing in the wind. And so he went down at night and literally dug up records, papers, and I acquired by gift from him 16 feet of records of the Lansing Chamber of Commerce that included photographs and scrapbooks of clippings and some correspondence, which were really the records of the Lansing Businessmen's Association, the predecessor of the Chamber of Commerce. Lots of interesting material on the development of the Wolverine Way, the contributions of Mr. Pruden to the construction of the highway between Lansing and East Lansing, so that it would be cement rather than mud. And I thought it was a very valuable collection that he was interested in selling most of the material. I think he probably still has some of it that he sold for the letterheads and things of that kind. But we were able to acquire some of it, and we have a finding aid for that. It's usable. Sad that it's only a remnant, but it was indicative, I think, of the time of the business community's approach to history.
You mentioned the Wolverine Way. I've never heard that expression before. What does that refer to?
It was the development of the highways. They traveled, for instance, they went by on old US 16 from Detroit to Grand Rapids, which is the old military highway of territorial days. But to get that paved, they had a project called the Wolverine Way, and as they went through by farms, farmers would give money to the fund to get this made into a passable year-round cemented highway, a two-lane highway.
And we call that highway what now?
It's now old US 16.
I see. You said something else that I think is important too. You talked about you had a finding aid. Mm-hmm. In your job with the state, you were able to publish over 20, I believe, of these finding aids to different locations. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, when I went to the American University to learn something about archival administration, I saw these very usable finding aids that the federal government did, and I really patterned them, what we did in Michigan, on those. And they were individual monograph publications with a brief history of the agency in respect to the records that were being described. And we had a series title, the dates they covered, and a unit number, which could have been one picture, one reel, 1 foot, or 1 inch, or 1,000 feet, or 10,000 reels, and one paragraph, succinctly written, giving a brief description of the record, what it was, basic content, and the arrangement. Just as precise and thoroughly objective description, bringing no prejudice whatever to the language. We put those together and did them for the censuses, the military establishment records, and some of the social welfare records, the most often used tools. These were very cheap. We're still using them, and I think there's a place for them in the services to the public. Since then, when Martha Bigelow came, we were able to, as director, we were able to publish a guide to the state records, not local records, state records. And but by then I was at home taking care of my mother, and I didn't have the freedom to do that for her. But they used this whole file cabinet full of typewritten finding aids that I had done, unpublished, as well as the published ones, to compile into this publication, which really is very usable. You have to make things available. It's no good on the shelf unless people are using it.
Right. You were very valuable again in editing and writing the foreword to Justin Kestenbaum's book, Out of a Wilderness.
Yes, I did that for Justin. Came at a time when I was recovering from surgery, and I didn't think I did very well with that. It wasn't, I worked hard on it, but I didn't think it was that good. But I remember Eugene Wenger read it, and he called me up and said it was very good, and that made me feel better.
I agree with Eugene, right. Then again, you came up as editor of Lansing Capital Campus and Cars. So you've been involved in publishing many times.
Well, I enjoyed doing that because I got to work with you and was really a historical advisor, I would think, more than an editor on that. I published, one of the things I did when my mother was sick was I had to be up a lot at night as well as daytime, and I took the names off of the Clinton and was it Ingham and Livingston map, ownership map, and compiled those and got those ready for publication. Not very creative, but it's been a usable thing because the map is rather scarce.
Uh-huh.
And the one in the State Archives, each time you unroll it, more of the map flies away. The pieces fall off the backing, so with that, the publication, they were able to retire the original and not expose it to such hard use. So there is a place for that sort of thing, although it's not my favorite kind of work.
You were able to steer us into some really interesting directions to find places not only where women were instrumental in history, but instrumental in some exciting fields like flying. And you maintain that contact with people like Babe Ruth in the Women Aviators. I picture you.
Oh, I love to fly.
With your bright hair and red hair in those days.
Days like this, I have a hard time staying on the ground. Yeah.
The stories must be great that you've heard with Babe, too, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. There are a lot of great women storytellers.
Yeah.
And Babe's had an interesting career in aviation. We do have a tape recording of her in our Voices of Clintonia, which was an interesting project I worked on. We were able to get a CETA grant for Clinton County, and we acquired the only county government or any government supported oral historian in the state of Michigan to this day. Before CETA went out, we hired a young lady who had experience in English from Michigan State. Of course, she was starving to death with that kind of credentials. There's no place for her if you couldn't get a job teaching, and what else was she to do? And so we used her for our interviewer and transcriber. She got some of them transcribed. And we have a good cross-section of people interviewed in Clinton County about how they felt about their county and about their rural life as it changed into an urban, even a megalopolis community that we're going to have. And so I felt very happy about that because she moved from that right into a job at Michigan State University and went on. So it was a good example of what CETA was supposed to do.
Train people.
Train and expedite people into their most productive occupations.
I'm glad you mentioned the Voices of Clintonia because that was the next thing I wanted to bring up. It was you and your role, and as I understand it, you're the person who is most instrumental in oral history in Michigan. You were president of the Michigan Oral History Council and started our Lansing Oral History Voices of Lansing project.
Yes. I started that. Voices of Lansing actually grew out of one that we were talking about at the REO Museum. And we wanted to, I had thoughts of that even when I was president of the REO Museum, was to go out and get the unique story of people involved in the development of transportation productions in the greater Lansing area. And my problem with that, Joyce, was that I had an interview with Scott Radford, and the morning I was to interview him, he died.
Oh.
And to this day, I've never been able to go back to that project. I gave some workshops, and I think they were well received, and they were an interesting audience. But when people found out how much hard work it was and how much time it was going to take on, you know, a lot of the volunteers fall away. And, but I'm sure that we will get back to that. But with the History Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, we were able to revitalize the idea of it, and including the library, the public library, under the capable direction of Joyce Thomas, we reactivated this and called it the Voices of Lansing.
What's the state doing by comparison? When you were president with the state, what's happening throughout the state in oral history?
Michigan does not have an oral historian.
No?
Does not have an oral history office as Kentucky, Tennessee, or Texas, for instance. Many states have either state-supported or offices in higher education, like well, I think of Baylor University as one of the leading places in Texas. They have oral history centers that receive government funds, but that's not true in Michigan. In fact, the only official oral history office is a one-man show within the Department of History at Northern Michigan University in Marquette. Without Russ Nagnagi there, that's it. That's why the Michigan Oral History Council was formed, was to fill this gap. We had a meeting at Michigan State University. Maury Crane was very much involved with that. And we heard people at the Kellogg Center throughout the session saying that they had these valuable, wonderful tapes, but no one was using them. Well, no one was using them because nobody knew they had them, and they weren't available. And it would be a great service if we could match the researcher with the resource, and that's the prime reason for our beginning. We still do that with an inventory of tapes that are available and with transcripts and indexes and releases. And when we first began, we found that people were not getting those necessary releases. And sadly, we always have to start with that education in our workshops, that without the release,
It's useless.
it's a waste of your time.
You've always been my mentor in history. Teach me again. Teach me how these could be used. Use your vision to tell me where and how these could be marketed and utilized.
Well, how many hours do you have to hear about all the uses? They're a great resource as a historical document, because done properly, they are a historical document, no better than any other traditional source of history. They have to be corroborated and corroborated and corroborated. But they also are unique because they fill in gaps, it's true, but they also have all the spontaneity and the poetry of people, the sound of their voices, the regional dialects. The other day on PBS, I heard some people from the Eastern Seaboard, particularly in Vermont, who were complaining about all these new people that were moving in and how the sounds of their language was changing. And they resented this very much. These people don't even sound like us. Well, of course they don't. They're not from Vermont. That wonderful sound. So all of those things show up in the tape that are very human things. And I think there's a lot some people conduct oral history for fact, whatever that is, and other people conduct oral history for the humanistic aspects of what happens to people when they talk about their first-hand experiences with another person who also influences the interview, and then there's interview for therapy. It's very rewarding, very therapeutic sometimes to get your thoughts in order and talk about things. You hear people say things that they've never articulated before. Maybe you hadn't even known they thought about before.
I believe that. I believe that. We're always a sounding board for each other.
So it's used a great deal for students in what is called cultural journalism, using the community for class as a classroom, for great scholarly research of all kinds, and for therapy. Sometimes I think the interesting thing is that it's used for reasons far beyond those that are anticipated in the beginning. For instance, the records accumulated by the survivors of the Holocaust. One of the first groups to use those tapes was the United States Department of Justice, who came in searching for clues to Nazi war criminals. And that was a far cry from what was anticipated.
I could think of another as finding relations between the survivors, helping them find people that they might have
Other
lost
people,
there, or
right.
at least know of their past.
But I have a friend who did interview a survivor of the Holocaust, and she said she could not transcribe it. She could not hear it twice. And she told the family this, and they said, "Oh, that's all right. We just want Papa to say it, and he can do it. He throw away the tape if he wants to, and throw away the pain with it."
Good idea.
So there's lots of different uses.
Right. I can imagine. You've always collected books and collected maps. They're all so much part of your interests. And then you added those interests to your husband's interests of collecting guns and printing presses. And you've got quite a collection now. Tell us about.
I bought my first book, I think, was a Clinton County history from Ted Foster. Theodore George Foster was a amateur historian who had professional standards, and he bought a lot of books, and I bought a lot of things from Ted through the years, and George bought things from him, and actually we knew that family in segments. We now know their grandchildren, but we were friends of Ted's a long time, and then after Ted was gone, we got to know his wife, Margaret Peg, very well. She was a great storyteller, and then we seemed to know each member of the family individually, which has been interesting. I've got a lot of things that relate to the Foster family, and eventually those will go back to the family.
This is the Fosters with Collins and Cooley
That
Law
was
Firm?
Walter Foster, who was a brother of Ted.
I see.
Yeah, and George collected Michigan-made guns and was very interested, avid reader, and so his interest in history and mine fell together, and he began to buy county histories and atlases to find the gun makers and where they were, and it just kind of went on from there, buying history materials. We had a good time doing that through the years.
One of George's presses is currently at Michigan State University.
No, that wasn't our press. That was a press that was owned by the Gannett newspaper company that was in the public library. And it had been in a parade at the time of the centennial of Lansing, I am told. And at that time, the toggle, which made it an operative Washington-style hand press, was lost. And for a long time, it sat in the public library right by the elevator, and its main use was to prop up posters. And it was Lois and F. Downing who said, it deserves better. And so Everett and George traveled around Michigan to find presses that were similar. And George, with his knowledge of tool and die, drew the specifications for the toggle. Well, he died before he could get it done. But now we have the toggle made, and we moved with the Downing's drive, constant drive over institutional inertia. We have got it out to Michigan State. The toggle's in place, and I gave him lumber for the old maple 16-foot maple flooring pieces for the floor of the exhibit. That's going in right now, and their staff is slowly building a old print shop where this press will actually be a working press where they can do demonstrations.
Wonderful. Your collection of posters ended up on the front of Justin's book, didn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we were really pleased that we were able to share with Justin for his publication on Lansing history a lot of ephemera and paper materials that had not been published before. It's nice to use fresh material as long as it's available.
I won't ask your age, but I'm curious.
Oh, I'm 63. I just had a birthday.
Right.
February 15th. I'm just so happy to have made it this far, Joyce.
You're kind of post-Valentine baby.
Yeah.
Just right after Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
What's your first memory of Lansing that you can remember? What did the world look like to you when you can first remember Lansing?
Coming to Lansing, I didn't come to Lansing very often. We didn't shop here or anything that I remember. I remember coming to Lansing with my sister Betty, who was older than I, 10 years older than I, and we would occasionally come to town and shop. I have one of those dime store pictures of me with my hair all curled up in a little peach-colored dress. So I always had a good time doing things with my sister, and because she was 10 years older than I, she waited a long time for me to grow up to do things with her. Then I remember coming to Lansing at night and seeing the Capitol lighted up, back when it was covered with little small light bulbs, not floodlighted as it is today. It was very distinctive at that time because the whole dome was strung with lights, and that was very impressive.
I remember one of the first stories I heard was about towers that were in the middle of the streets where the policemen stood, I believe, or fire towers. They watched the house. Did you ever see those?
No, I never saw that. No.
That
I remember there were still railroad or streetcar tracks. There were no streetcars, but the tracks were still there in the brick pavement.
We have a picture of East Lansing where they gradually get cemented over and over through 3 decades.
Yes.
And finally the street becomes smooth.
Yeah.
And we tore the streets up and put bricks back again.
Yes, and in front of the Capitol, that's what we did. Yeah. That brick paving, there's a nice strip of that and the entrance to Grand Rapids. You can still see it. Sometimes it shows through where the macadam peels off. That brick is still there. It was a very durable form of pavement that was sponsored by the State Highway Department. Got some beautiful lantern slides of the construction and so forth in the state archives from the old Highway Department. But it was so expensive in manpower.
One of your special interests, too, is the Turner Dodge Mansion.
Yes, I remember giving tours to the Turner Dodge Mansion when it was a dirty, grubby hole. I always went home with a nasal infection because of the mold. But I remember standing on the back, what some people call the back, it's the riverside of the house, and with people standing in the rain all the way back to what is now the parking lot. That was not there at that time. In fact, when they made that parking lot, the people who bid on the job didn't know that a whole Lansing school had been dumped in there, and that it was full of huge pieces. We're talking 6x8 chunks of cement. And I talked to the bulldoze man one day, and I said, "Did you know this was in here?" And he said, "No, I would never bid on the job if I'd known." And I said, "I'm sorry we didn't tell you," because some of us knew that the city had dumped along that bank for years. And it's the very area where the parking lot is now, to the southeast of the main structure, was a dump.
So you've seen the growth from that, then a Turner Dodge mansion, to
Yeah.
what it is today?
So now people stand in line at Family Christmas to come into a renovated house. We've just got a $70,000 grant from the legislature for a master plan for use of the house, which we think is a prime necessity. It will be turned over to Parks and Recreation for that purpose.
How do you see it in the future? What will it be like?
Well, the city's never decided what they really wanted to do with the house. We know it can't be a house museum because theirs are so extremely expensive, and there are so many of them in the area. It deserves to be used as a small cultural center for the community, and I hope to see a reconstruction of the carriage house, which the city tore down, you have it built specifically for an educational center for the north, to serve particularly that north end of Lansing, where we would have perhaps even studios for artists to work, and training centers, and have it take some of the pressure off the house, because some of the uses that we have had in the house, just to keep it a viable thing for the city to support. They pay the heat bill, and they replace the windows and keep the roof on, things of that kind. Take some of that out into the new training center. I think there's a great deal that can be done there.
We'll take a little break and come back. I want you to tell me about the 5 locations in the city you think are the best locations of all, that any person who is interested in history should never miss.
Okay.
Well, when you
It's
talk.
running, so I hope it's recording. Should be recording one more time.
Okay. We were going to come back and talk about that walking tour of Lansing, the places that you say are the most interesting, most historical, the ones that should be seen.
Well, the Lansing Chamber of Commerce at one time had a downtown business council that Paula Johnson supervised, and she was very efficient, effective director of that. One of the subcommittees was a history committee, and one of the things that we did outside of special events, we put on bed races, did all kinds of things, but we created walking tours of the downtown area. Ernie Brown worked with the Scouts and developed a walking tour of the Capitol Square, and talked about the trees in the Capitol Square that were outstanding, because there's a story for each one. And we got CATA to give us buses to pick seniors up, and we took them on guided tours of the downtown area. And we published 2 different walking tours of the downtown area. We at one time tied in a walking tour with Turner Dodge and had a bus that went downtown and then took in the North Lansing Historical District, ending up at Turner Dodge. And I think we worked so hard, we did so well that we embarrassed the chamber. And they did away with when Paula left for a better job, the Downtown Business Council ended, and so did our history committee. But those walking tours were done, the graphics for them were done by Jack Thompson, who was employed at Michigan State University. Jack did a beautiful job. He's always a joy to work with. and we published those and got them out free to the public, and they're still being used by people because they were not copyrighted, and people picked them up and copied it. We have a lot of interesting buildings. Of course, you've got the Capitol with its complex, and the new structure now with the library and historical center. But you've many folk houses, really right in the downtown area. One of the new things that was done this year, well, it was '89, that we got to see the renovation, total inside renewal, but outside renovation of the women's clubhouse that Ari Olds had contributed to the city in the name of his wife Meta, and that is now law offices and so forth. Jim Winkler invited me to their reception and opening, and it was most impressive. But they have saved the facade, the outside of the building has been carefully preserved, and I understand that the marquee was not available that night on a cold winter night in 1989, but it was on order, and they're going to put a marquee up over the entranceway, very comparable to what it was in the beginning. So they've done a very credible job there. I like the old temple, which is now the Cooley Law School, and with all its iconography and its imitation marble inside, but it's good imitation marble. And there's one of my favorite buildings, aside from the Capitol, is the Board of Water and Light building, which is now up for sale, I understand. The old powerhouse, which has a base of black, and the brick gets lighter and lighter as we go from black coal to the color of ignition and white heat at the top. A lot of people look at that building and don't see that, I think. It's very unusual. And at the time we were working to get the modern Art Deco cream and blue tile Knapp's building and some of the other buildings on the state register, and some of them on the then preliminary to going on the National Register of Historic Places. The city did not want us to put, or the Board of Water and Light rather, did not want us to put that building on the register, and their reason was because they felt that government would tell them that they had to change the building to accommodate an increase in stacks due to the pollution. But now, with the pollution making operation moved away completely, and the open building will be able to be used for something else, maybe turned into a mercantile center. I have no idea what's ahead for that building. Very close by to that, there was a building that had REO over the head and had what appeared to me, I haven't seen any records that say this, but it looked like Pewabic tile on the inside, and it was the first showroom for the REO car. But on Grand, we've lost so many things in downtown Lansing. That went, yes. Oh, yes, I worked on the Save the Michigan, and I remember George had he had all kinds of things. He had bowled in the Strand bowling alley, and even had a pencil that said Strand Alley. And I have a master's thesis that was done by a woman who wrote her thesis in historic preservation on the Strand before it became the Michigan. We worked hard to save that. It was not anything the city was behind. It was too bad. We brought the son of the original architect back from Connecticut and New York, and he brought the original drawings for that theater with him, and we had a celebration in the theater with the theater organ playing. We did all kinds of things trying to get the people of the community motivated. if you could, in my mind, I can walk the city and think of all the things that we've lost, and it's really tragic. I don't know about these modern replacements. Some of them I hope will fall down, in 40, 50 years, because they're not architecturally pleasing. I think they lack style. They lack continuing qualities, I think, that I look for in buildings. Some of the hotels that are coming in now, I think are very mediocre in their design.
What are the changes for the better that you see?
Oh, there's always changes for the better. The renovation of the cityscape leading to the Capitol is a big plus, because if you analyze every avenue to our Capitol is ugly.
Oh, yes.
And I see we have Saginaw Street, which is a street of ugly signs. It looks like it just grew like Topsy without any urban development planning, whatever. If we see DeWitt Township going the same way, the strip from St. John's to Lansing is getting uglier every time I drive it. Small businesses seem to be coming in. It's not because they're small that I'm against them. I'm just saying that it's just a configuration of a lot of things that are short-lived, and of course there's some spots on that road that are so contaminated that nobody can buy them. They're dead properties because of prior use. That's a tragic thing. People don't talk about that very much, but we have it, within just a few miles of the Capitol. But I don't see why we can't have beautiful things. Bartholomew, when was it, 1917 or 1927? I'd have to look at the date on it again to make sure. We've had some beautiful plans for the city of Lansing. Bartholomew's plan, if it had been followed, would have been made the city a classic in landscape, for instance, of the Michigan Avenue strip, which now includes the Sin District of the city.
I was thinking that.
And on out to the Capitol, out to the campus with its lack of, well, they've tried to put in some trees in the boulevard, but the old trees have all been stripped off. And all the charming old houses have given way to used car lots and that type of car sale building. I realize that pole barns are very efficient and effective, and certainly my barn's falling down, and if I want to build a structure, I'll probably have to put up a pole barn. The average life is 40 to 50 years. Do you realize I'll have to live to be 100 before I see those ugly things fall down?
Good.
But they will come down.
I want you around that
They
long.
change. We can't save it all. We shouldn't.
Uh-huh.
But there are a few things that we should save, and I do believe the Capitol is one of them. And I am not convinced that we're spending too much money on the renovation and restoration of the Capitol. It's both. They renovated one side and restored one side on the second floor. Everything costs more than you anticipate if you're going to do something to a structure. And I know from working in that building and from observing it all these years that it has had very poor maintenance and very poor housekeeping. And if you don't do any housekeeping for 80 years, naturally when you decide to clean house and renovate, it's going to cost a lot of money if you haven't spent it all those other years. And we know from the work that's already been done that it is a gem of interior design and decoration, probably unequaled in all the states. So we do have something very special in Lansing.
What do you think of the idea of going back to the gray color instead of the white on the Capitol as an authentic restoration?
That really doesn't bother me. The white will become gray long if they just leave it alone for a while. Pollution in the air will make it gray.
Good.
All the soot and so forth. As far as being a purist in restoration, I think that's going to a little extreme. If they do the inside and they preserve the outside, I am much more concerned about the sandblasting they did to the building to clean it up and what the deleterious aspects of that was. That is much more of concern to me than whether they paint over white to make it gray. I mean, let's be realistic here.
Right, exactly. What about the Women's Hall of Fame?
I think that's a very good use of a residence that had potential for use. There's one of them right adjacent to it is the Scott House. That's really an undervalued and underused city property. I would hope that someday that will be as well used as the Cooley House is. I think the Women's Studies Association need a big gold star for what they've accomplished there with grant monies and private contribution. Lucille Beelan gave the gallery, and Judge Coleman gave an exhibit area, and there have been many statewide contributors that made the new furniture and the new appointments inside very usable. And there are some things that just need to be saved. Of course, the big Scott House went down because Mrs. Scott said that she never wanted it to be left. When she put it in her will, I believe that when she died, the house was to be torn down rather than to have it be diminished in any way from the way she wanted it to be.
Oh,
and I approve of that.
Do you?
Yeah. I tore down our Kebler house because the renters ruined it, and I didn't really have enough money to bring it back to where it should be. And it was painful to see it go down, but I'm much happier going around that corner and seeing it in my mind's eye than to see it falling down brick by brick and cornice by cornice. This way I still have the cornices out in the barn. George and I winched them all down and saved them.
Good. What feature of the community is the most rewarding to you, We talked about all these most significant locations, but I think we're talking here more about people, personality.
I think the thing that makes Lansing so important is the center of government, what goes on in government. It's an exciting, interesting place. I realize you can't have a meeting on Monday and Friday because everybody's gone home, that sort of thing. But there's the old core that's been here a long time that sustains the community too. So it's an exciting place from the standpoint of what the government contributes. But the services are so rich in this area, and the fact that we have such wonderful libraries. We have the Library of Michigan, where I really grew up, and that I use most frequently. And you've got Michigan State University, and you have Lansing Community College, which is a beautiful computerized library for me, designed to serve the particular audience they do. When I want up-to-date modern information, I can get it there. They actually do database runs for students, not at no expense, and really the library will run database searches for me, but they don't really care about doing it if I'm not a state employee or working for the legislature, and I have to pay for it, a considerable amount of money, whereas one credit at Lansing Community College entitles you to every service of that library, free interlibrary loan, free database searches. They really do a good job down there, and they have a staff that has service-minded philosophy.
LCC's also got that computerized registration.
Right.
They're way ahead of it. It'll be 5 years before that comes to
Yeah.
Michigan State.
I registered Friday for a class by telephone.
What class?
I'm going to take a class for fun this time. I always end up taking a course in law, paralegal, introduction, or writing for legal writing, or linguistics. I mean, why did I take
Research
that linguistics
for
class?
Right.
But
Writing.
this one's going to be an art class just for fun in handmade paper making.
Oh, how exciting.
I made some paper once in a class at Western Michigan University because they have a very outstanding curriculum for the paper industry. But this will be for fun, and I think it's, I always meet interesting new people in every class as well as learn something.
That is a big asset to this community because we...
And you can take off from here and go anywhere.
Exactly.
My mother used to say she never wanted to live any further north than 116, and once I thought, my, that's a strange thing for my mother to say, because she never said anything that smacked of that kind of thing. But I knew what she meant. She meant that she could get in her car and go to Grand Rapids, Detroit, north. She could take off in every point of her compass from her door. That's what she was talking about, and I like that.
And be there in an hour?
Yeah, because I can go to Detroit Public as I did last week in, in an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and I'm there. And
that's why I moved here. I agree.
It's you're in the hub of things, and yet it's 4 hours gets me up to Traverse City, and 5, 6 hours, and I'm in Rogers City at the Huron Shores Writing Institute. And, you can take off and do things here.
What are your suggestions to residents and business people for the future?
Well, living on a 147-acre farm, where I see the Capitol out my kitchen window, and where in our township we're about, there are very few parcels even of that size left to be farmed. Urbanization is creeping out. We're going to be part of the megalopolis that covers all of southern Michigan, at least south of the Bay City line, in 2000. I think that there are great challenges for business and industry and government, and I think the one thing that we need to do of all is to plan constructively without thinking always of the short-term return. I talked about the ugly streets and the lack of planning. There's no long-term planning. Zoning does not, right now in this area, does not take in green spaces. We are not zoning 40-acre parcels and 10-acre parcels. We're not controlling the kind of zone of development based on the soil, the land. It's based on what people want now, what they will pay for, and how much people will make off of it. And there'll be a day when that philosophy is threatened. It may already be. Then we may have to turn to a little different philosophy.
You refused to sell property because you felt it wouldn't provide a tax base for your community.
Oh yeah, I had some property that had a good sound offer on from a church, but I said that I believe churches should be taxed. They're in business like anybody else in most cases, and they do not pay taxes, and they would not support and bring anything into the township. So I had a hard time with that. Not that I was against the church or the particular denomination, but I just feel that way about it. They run wineries and factories and all kinds of things.
And investments.
Right. And I think they should pay their tax like everybody else. That's not a very popular opinion, but I have a lot of opinions that are not particularly popular, but that doesn't make them any less mine.
You've seen the community go to, from speaking of a land point of view, from the original settlers to a new type of landholder too. I know you've been doing some research on who's holding land in Clinton County, Ingham County these days.
You see a lot of people that stay on the land, and it's interesting that our Clinton County Historical Commission right now is we following up on a heritage conservation survey we did in the early 80s. We're taking just the village of Westphalia, and we're taking everything, old and new. And to meet the common eye, there's not much old there because they've modernized so much. But if you look a little harder, there's some interesting houses and interesting buildings that have been there a long time. And what's interesting about this community is, of course, it's German Catholic, and it's preserved its ethnic flavor and its ethnic values, and its strong religious cohesion is very obvious. We see practically every building trade is represented in that community except the brickmaker. And of course that's interesting because the first thing they did when they got there was make brick on the site for the church. But it's an interesting community, and there you see fracturization of the Centennial Farms as you do all throughout the county. When we do our update on Centennial Farm ownership, we see that people break off 1 to 5 acres for each of their children or something. So Clinton County right now it's a very, the Register of Deeds work has increased each year, bringing in more and more revenues for the fracturization as the big farms become small, and so that you have this roadside development of new houses with small land.
We've just
supporting.
seen one of those farms lose its centennial, sesquicentennial, I'm not sure, farm, the Clark farm.
That's a sesquicentennial farm. We celebrated that. We celebrated that as the first farm to be celebrated in the sesquicentennial as being in the family for 125 years. It was not the oldest farm, but because there were ribbon farms and some places down in Monroe and in the southeastern part of the state that were earlier. But the Clark farm in Clinton County, Eagle Township, was the first one we celebrated. We had a great day, and I'm very pleased we did that because of the 3 sons that were alive then, there's only one remaining now. So time changed things very quickly there. But the farm is still owned by a descendant, one of the grandsons that owns it. So there are, and of course Mary Springsteen at that time still owned the Joseph Eddy farm, one of my grandfathers, which was bought in 1834. He owned a section or so back there. He's buried on the bank of the Looking Glass River along with the Indians back in the old Commons farm. But she was not well at that time, and she had no immediate descendants, and we just couldn't carry on any big celebration there, But I see a lot of consistent use and respect for the land, and I see a lot of change to the land of the 100-acre farm or field across the road from me in the last year has changed from agricultural to light industrial, and we have a Myers truck transfer unit on it, and the trees are now gone where the old house was. The Michigan Piano Company is building a warehouse retail building there. Another house where Mr. Nichols, who is known for being a builder of barns, the house was picked up and moved away. They saved the house, but this is all part of the Grand River corridor, and it means new development and change as the city spreads out. But I just plea for reasonable planning and not for the quick dollar.
How would you like to see your farm changed if you were to sell it?
It's a beautiful farm. It drains north of the Looking Glass and south of the Grand. It's on the master plan. It's zoned for residential. So as long as I have a renter who farms it, it is agricultural, and I'll keep it that way as long as I can. But I think the time is very short before water and sewer and all of those services, which we have to have. You can't hold off on sewers until people have hepatitis. It's unrealistic. And the county has been very slow in maintaining their drains. have done anything on the drains for 80 years. Now they're having this great spurt of storm sewer and so forth. And when I went to the hearings over in Watertown and they talked about drains, I thought they were talking about drains. What they were talking about was trenching, old-fashioned, just trenching without putting in tile and I couldn't believe my ears, to be so backward at this day and age. They put big tile across the road for me this winter here. Huge tiles that went in there. It's, to accommodate the new development along Grand River Avenue, US 15. So every change, when they changed the surface of that field across from me on the south, I got a 2-acre pond that we hadn't had before. Mm-hmm. And so before the winter was out, they put the storm sewer in, and I noticed it took care of the pond.
Good.
But you see, one change triggers another, and it seems to be mathematically progressive.
What if this were to have homes eventually in it? Can you think of a good name that you'd like to see it named?
No, I wouldn't want to even think about that.
I
don't go by the Madison Street house very often, and sometimes I don't like to look at the corner where the Kebler house was. So if I sold it, I probably wouldn't drive down this street very much.
What are George's hopes for the farm? Do you know?
He always was more realistic about change, I think, than even I was. I was amazed at him being as adaptable and flexible as he was. He realized, as I do, that we only keep it for a little while and try to keep it as well as you can and leave it in good shape. And hope that you've educated the next generation a little so that they'll do a good job too. But that's all you can do, is educate and hope, because you're not going to have any say in it at all.
Anything you would like to have to say about, if you could tell the future about Lansing?
Future of the land, old future of Lansing. Why, that's such an important question. I really ought to write a book about that. I think government's going to become more metropolitan. I believe that if I lived to be a very old woman, I would see Watertown become a municipality, a township. I think township government's one of the most expensive things I pay for. I know it works in some places, but I also see in Clinton County there are townships where governmental incest exists. The township supervisor is cousin to the clerk and the in-law to the, related to the husband of the treasurer, and people don't want to run for office because they say, what's the use? That kind of attitude toward government, I think that's very expensive, and I think it's got to change. And really, township government in the southern tier of our county doesn't have much to say anymore. County government does most of their decision making, and the state does a lot of the county's decision making. And in some cases it should be so, because I see some terrible incompetence in people that are on boards and commissions and making decisions that affect other people's lives. And I think we have to educate people better, more thoroughly, to become more effective citizens.
I agree.
I think it's a real crisis that's already hit us. This lag, talk about cultural lag, that's an example of it. We stayed with the old system too long.
And what changes should be in the new system?
I think more education in how government works and the role of the individual and how each person is responsible to take a role of some kind. It's complicated, it's expensive, time consuming, but it's very, very necessary, I think.
You know, two examples of people who want to take a role, and yet, guessing it probably because of our age we can't. I think that's one way a society could become more responsive, is to allow people to remain productive.
Yeah, I don't run into that too often except when I apply for a job. People always let me work hard for me because I work for nothing. I seem to get a chance to do a lot of different things. But you're right. I think the era of the youth cult is waning. That respect for the older people and people who have had experience is going to increase. It's all part of our responsibility for education. Such opportunities there.
Any changes George might like to see if you were able to voice them?
Oh, I don't know. I know he was very concerned about the use of the land. I really can't say.
You've been a joy to listen to talk with. I know that there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to want to add to this. I hope there's a way we can still
Well,
do
we've
it.
covered an awful lot. We've, given enough time, we could make over the whole world.
Right. Thank you for talking with us tonight.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.